Perfect. Lauren Camp is the author of 5 poetry collections, most recently Took House from Tupelo Press. It received the American Fiction Award in Poetry and was named a distinguished favorite for the Independent Press Award. 100 Hungers from Tupelo in 2016 won the Dorset Prize. It was also a finalist for the Arab American Book Award, the Housatonic Book Award, and the Sheila Margaret Motten Prize. Turquoise Door, Finding Mabel Dodge Lewin in New Mexico, was a finalist for the New Mexico-Arizona Book Award. Her poems have appeared in many journals and anthologies, including Kenyon Review, Prairie Schooner, the Los Angeles Review, Poet Lore, Beloit Poetry Journal, Witness, and the Academy of American Poets Poem a Day. Her poems have been translated into Turkish, Mandarin, Serbian, Arabic, and Spanish. Honors also include fellowships from Denver Botanic Gardens and Black Earth Institute, and a visiting writer position at the Mayo Clinic, and most recently as a visiting astronomer at the Grand Canyon, which, if you've been following Lauren on Facebook, was a really exciting thing to see. Lauren lives in New Mexico, where she teaches through the state's Poetry Out Loud program and her own community workshops. She also teaches for Hugo House and the Hudson Valley Writers Center, where she is a beloved teacher and her classes are always sold out. Poet and novelist Hala Alan says, Took House is, quote, an astonishing, enchanted world of nature and cityscape, interior terrains, art making, and witnessing all at once. Please help me welcome Lauren Camp.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm going to start with some poems from Took House, and then I will go to some newer poems. And I decided, so Took House came out in a few months into the pandemic when I thought for sure it was going to end, when I think we all thought it was going to end. But I've read a bunch from it on Zoom entirely, and I thought I would read a poem that I have not read to any audiences to start. A normal week. I believe I've earned what isn't yet bitter. This whole town hides ghosts, and my first sip is the last measure. I find the setting conducive, such an elegant empire of forks. Even the knives hold their judgments, no more than slicing. We are accommodating the room, and the room is not rushing. The cup is empty. How desperate weakening can be. We both have houses with windows where we lie in every tossed night. We might be recuperating from darkness, the bend at the stairs, the crack in each hour. Here we receive the fruit brought to the table. We accept organ meats and small plates of cream. I lick the whole day and my belly fills. The candles crackle back. I remember nothing, and nothing comes after me. So the book has 3 storylines or 3 elements that sort of tie together, either feeding into each other or giving some kind of break from each other. So there's a main storyline of a relationship, and then there are poems about raptors and other high desert predators. And there are ekphrastic poems about artists and artist processes. This poem is called Common Raven. Even on the main road, black wing and gloss, a call without such sorrow. Wheel ruts in nameless light, snow cold. How long until you land, each feather fluffed with the faithless world? There is such ungodliness in what the tongue will feed on. You make the road a table, demand pleasure in ransom, bragging your laws with glottal stops. And now the gorge, the eye, skin, leg, as tires move by your endless chewing. It seems like rage, but it is only hunger. So the longest poem in the book is 13 sections, and it's an ekphrastic poem based on or inspired by the work of Donald Judd, a conceptual artist. And it's based specifically on 100 boxes that he made, untitled, that are housed in Marfa, Texas, and they're made of mill aluminum. So I'm going to read you the first 4 parts of this and the final part. It's called, the whole poem is called Empirical Theories of a Box Maker. In the prairie grass, a revision of rigor in sunrise and terminating hours. On concrete floor, desolation. These are the breath of the box, the plural of what's been placed. 100 the same repetitions, how many times, that make it possible to understand that the sky wanders. A century of boxes looking for daylight or moon border. In each box, I separate distance, look through, see what's been emptied. After a day at the boxes, you want what isn't. Next and next, next and next. You think you are walking, but instead you are waking backwards, linking revelations together and waiting for the room to stop disclosing its fissures. The boxes have been abandoned or are full. When we build, we put walls on the innermost. On your way out of the desert, stop by the edge of the road and look at the rusted hide of husked fields against one another. All places are good, all places savage. I thought Celan said it best, that our roots are stuck in the air where they remain. Look at the flowers, specifically the daisies that grow loose as sand twists and spirals. Look at the clouds, seared white, with nothing gripping the sky. So I did a reading last night, and I was talking to the audience about writing into place, like not writing necessarily about place, but using place to help me explore memories or emotions or something I want to hold in a poem. And I think I do this in every poem, but there are a few that it really shows up in very fully. This poem is called Perennials. Each time I left the dark room, I took the bones of roses that had once grown in the alley. I took the tinted water and the succulent sun. So strong was my need that I then took the pale moon, filled 8 pockets with pressures. Already I was tired, but I took and continued, less exact and more needy. Because I was opened by another, I will always carry these remnants of pouring light in my body. I must remember that my mind was disrobing, and this wasn't pleasure, but loss, growing like a bud. I returned past culverts and tree limbs, past the flesh of dry fields. I returned, wanting to live in the future, to praise its perfection. I returned empty, without. And the last poem I want to read from Took House is called Homeostasis Night. When I can't sleep, I ask you to tell me a story, though I am all grown up. And I listen to what it was like to be a boy that 1 year in Southern Illinois, how you loved snow and your bike, and where your house was at the end of a lane, and how you found that house because of a man at a gas station. But then I fall asleep and don't know what happens next. So I have a new book coming out next year it's about several things. I think that's how I like to build books, actually, but in part, it's inspired by the artist Agnes Martin, who spent some time in New Mexico, a lot of years in New Mexico. And I think this poem actually explains it pretty well, why I started the project, sort of not knowing it was going to be a project. The book is called An Eye in Each Square, and the poem is called Must Learn Neither. I had plundered past Nervous, a tense Walmart truck clanging the interstate, smoke gnawing the face of some mountain. America, aromatic with ravages, in schism, sacrificed. I stayed woke most nights near the door, occupied with every handle. 4 years my father had gone from corridor to quiver, and I mustered my saddle to get to him often. 4 years of crinkled conversing. Yes, and ginger. I shivered through rooms of my home in the desert with its stoic astonishments and took on some needles. I couldn't settle the ache, the curt country and my family, every ache, size, every shape. To reset, I've come to the distance, to watch the ocean repeat how to unfinish. I brought with me a light jacket and a thick book about Agnes Martin. I'm not sure why I packed it, what it celebrates, but I know the artist and her simple lines against excess. Know she made sacred an emptiness. Maybe I'll hear thin strands of refuge apart from the chaos that circles. What I want is nothing, no meaning, no matter, no more. I've run away with the most fragile questions, haggard in a small room big enough for a bed with its modest blanket. I let my watch doze on the sill. Minor details hurtle over grasses, a wind-ribbed fence. The land around me tugs, I don't know it. Fog covers, blank space consumes me. I figure every day I'll navigate to the tail end of this small town with its translucent leavings. What I want to figure out is what could be in the neithers. I am entering a conversation with Agnes for no reason I yet understand. I am not looking to rivet to her, but to be extracted from the sharp cuff of politics, of dementia-tweaked presence, of the gravity of a future that keeps rolling toward me. How do you recover from a decisive wound? A line, it never leaves you. So at the time I was writing this, I was doing some research on Agnes, but basically the poems were more my investigation of myself and my connection to the artwork and why I needed that. It just seemed like the world was in total chaos, both the outer world and my inner world, my family. I began this very shortly after Donald Trump was elected. My father was in a memory care facility, and we were watching him decline steadily. This poem is about Agnes and about her mental state. It's called Deeper in Mind on a Clear Day. Home carted her out, and home was a knot that confined her to ambulance, tragedy, stupor, each scar forming a realm, and voices who knew and explained in ghost-driven diction. She narrowed blue eyes to coyotes, to a long partial existence. As abstract as that seems, those mathematical edges lit a way to relief. And finally, her ravaged mind held in containment. Grueling testament, her hands bracing a pressure she found dependable. And home became her hands, sweeping the outside to some whispers, became the thin penciled repeat of moving grief to the side, to the opposite issues. I think I write a lot of love poems, actually. I mean, I write love poems to all kinds of things, but this is an actual love poem to a person. It's called Open Heart. His scar made him unlike the men who took me to begging, to bowling alleys on motorcycles, who threw off their boots to the corners. He had no last excuses. Our desert habitat juggled a thicket of cotton and spread flat or fluttered. We'd larked out of the suburbs and no longer stored rabbits in wire cages, but buried their bones when a dull ruin settled inside them. Aren't we all just containers? He loved to the bruise at my center. He insisted on peeling the vegetables. Years and how many rooms spread to our angers or the intimacy of each heaven to heaven. But it's the slash impressed at his rib cage, the span of sawn truth, that layer of sternum sutured with a needle, not a mess. A salvation. With his whole heart, he is permanently fixed. We each need a reference line, how his body knows to hold it. I finger the seam and the worn flesh over that replaced valve with its clock. End to end music. Submit to its never ceasing. I have two more poems, and before I read them, I just want to say how glad I am that I am going first of all, so I can listen to Joan and Anna and Edwin without having to think about anything. Thank you, Jennifer, so much for organizing this, I think back in March or something. It's really wonderful to be here, and thank you to everyone who's here, including some people I see who were at the reading last night too, so what a treat to be here with everyone. Okay, this poem is in, and I've been assuming that you all know Agnes Martin's very spacious, empty artwork. I see some people nodding their heads, but if not, go take a look at some. They allow a lot of space for you to enter and either, put yourself in there or be frustrated or be grateful or whatever. So this is in Agnes's voice, but also in mine, this poem. Ego as deduction. You must not say I saw the sunrise. In bed, past the time of the rippling light, lying in piles of sheets, dreaming what was dearest, the charm of a word waking me with a grid that's never as occupied as worry and hours. What if, undone, my mind is resting the burdens of need? 8 times the repeat of desire, and it feels right as a blue and a pencil. You must not say I structure the line as a range of mountains, a luminous body of sky, and the negative sky unbroken to prayer. You must not interfere and Godspeed the alternate ways the empty so thoroughly means. The last poem I want to read came from an experience I had last winter. We were entering the second winter of COVID. It seemed like everything was dangerous and exhausting. People were miserable. I include myself in this very much. We were tired, we were scared. And I had the chance to be a writer in residence for the Denver Botanic Gardens. My project that I tasked myself with was to find optimism somehow. And this is one of the poems that I wrote. Rocky ground. Before we do what we have to do, the dishes, the folding of laundry, I offer to wreck you with what I know now, which is impractical new buds on the succulents, the contraptions of petals they've grown. Before we do what we need to do, the tending of worry, the garbage, the leftover grief, I remind you the mid-air billow of milkweed from summer's lush mouth. Before we return to deadlines and details, our humanity neatly boxed up, turn to whatever my friend Joan calls impending doom. I offer you the fire wheel's straight sunning ruby and snow angel blossoms wide open as hearts. Let's watch the muzzles of insects at each flower bell, having parted the curtains to reach what they need. This moment. That's what we have to stop heartbreak. Inward brimming light, the day sounds and tulips' inverted hats. Nothing to fail at. Everything is wind rivulet and small graces and paired doves with their mothering tones. Now is a matter of spirit, without sorrow. Now is feather and branches, seeds again in this pine-throated sphere, now where I live. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lauren. That was really beautiful. It was so nice to hear a hopeful poem at the end. It reminds us all of the pandemic and the early days of the pandemic. And my friend Fred Marchant, who's here in the audience, saying that he's coming to everyone from year one of the pandemic when he did a Gray Wolf reading. And he knew how long it was going to go on for before many of us did. So thank you so much, Lauren. It was so great to hear you read. We are really happy to have you here and also to have you teaching for us. The students are very fortunate to be able to work with you. Joan Kwon Glass is the Korean-American author of Night Swim, winner of the Diode Editions book contest. She serves as editor-in-chief for Harbor Review, as a Brooklyn Poets mentor and poet laureate of Milford, Connecticut. Her work has won or been a finalist for several prizes, including the Pushcart Prize, Sundress Anthology Best of the Net, the Subnivian Award, and the Lumiere Review Award. Her poems have been published or are forthcoming in Hayden's Ferry Review, Prairie Schooner, Asian American Writers Workshop, Rhino, and elsewhere. Our students are very lucky that Joan has recently joined the faculty of the Hudson Valley Writers Center. We've gotten so many emails about how great her Monday night poetry workshop was this fall, that she will be back again for a new session of Monday night poetry in January. So if you're looking for a great class, you can sign up on our website now to work with Joan, and scholarships are available until December 15th. Ellen Bass says of Joan's work, with admirable skill, Joan Kwon Glass has found words for the heartache that lies beyond words. These mature and deeply moving poems recognize the universality of grief and leave us with the hard-earned truth that, quote, every darkness we bear hides such small mercies. Please help me welcome Joan Kwon Glass.
Wow, that was a really lovely introduction, Jennifer. Thank you. As you know, I'm completely obsessed with the Hudson Valley Writers Center. I love teaching for you, and I'm such a fan of everything that you're doing for the literary community, for writers and readers. So thank you. And also, you're just a nice person, and that's always just awesome. So I'm going to be reading a few poems from Night Swim. And I'm also going to read some poems that I don't often read that are published online. And before I read Night Swim, I always feel compelled to share that it's a very difficult book. So just a content warning, all of the poems in this book reference suicide, loss to suicide. In 2017, I lost my 11-year-old nephew to suicide, and 2 months later, his mother, who was my only sister, also took her life. So in a 2-month period, I lost them both. As you can imagine, it was an incredibly painful experience, and one that I think I'm still coming to understand. So as strange as it seems, you know, I was asked in an interview once if writing this book helped me heal. And I had to really think about it. And the answer was no. The writing the poems didn't help me heal. They helped me to understand, just to understand any of it or try to make sense of it for myself. The healing is happening now, very slowly. So the first poem I'm going to read is called Owl in the City, and it's a timely poem. I don't know if you remember, but a few years ago, there was an owl that was found hidden in the Rockefeller Center Christmas tree. And I wrote this poem, and it's included in Night Swim. It's about despair and it's about hope. Owl in the City. Today, a worker finds a saw-wet owl nesting in the cavity of the Rockefeller Christmas tree. He will be whisked away to a wildlife sanctuary after America swoons over the creature who made it such a long way unharmed. A newsman reports that this year, even the Rockefeller Center tree seems weary of the world. The gargantuan Norway spruce rising in the city appears to be missing a third of its branches, as though it had been dragged those 170 miles from upstate, leaving a trail of itself as it went. Its cones weep soundlessly from their branches, fall around us like tiny scaled cocoons. An expert confidently claims there is an explanation. The tree had been wrapped tightly before transport, holding the branches close to the trunk. While he assures us it will unfold on time, I find I prefer the abstractions, the animal that survives in a fallen tree after so many miles. How even the grandest of us can appear broken when we just need to unfold. In 2 weeks, the plaza will be filled with the kind of dazzling luminescence we humans conjure. 3 million Swarovski crystals flashing their astral determination to get us safely to the new year. Maybe it will snow on Christmas. Maybe every person in this city will survive. Meanwhile, in his new home, the owl's yellow eyes widen. His bark sounds the alarm as a long night begins. Night Swim is divided into the stages of grief. And that was a really interesting and strange process for me. Trying to figure out, because I wrote all of the poems and then decided that that's how the book would be organized. And organizing the poems into the stages of grief was a little bit like experiencing grief in a variety of seasons. So I'm going to read Grief in 4 Seasons, which is also in Night Swim. Grief in 4 Seasons. Winter. Empty bird feeder. Mounds of snow sealed by ice. My son's footprints like animal tracks across the yard. Christmas video, Facebook memories. Your voice, your voice. Traffic from the nearby overpass blows by like an Arctic wind. Spring. We found your Nintendo DS. You'd made avatars for all of us. I play your games in bed and dream in pixels. Outside, flowers bloom everywhere, and though I've waited so long for them, I am happiest in the dark, zooming in on your smiling cartoon face. Summer. 2 mallards bathe in our pool. A mother skunk wobbles across the yard with her babies. Animals suddenly unafraid. Everything bravest before the light fades. The air is thick with gnats at dusk. I hold my breath. Fall. This September, you would have been 15. I finally put your harmonica in a drawer. My children never seem to grow tired of making s'mores. Their faces are smeared with chocolate, giddy, and marshmallow feral. In the morning, I empty the fire pit. The ashes cling to everything. This next poem is called The Branch and the Bird, and it's also from Night Swim. In this photograph of us, you are 3, I am 6. You are perched on the kitchen counter, grinning, tendrils in mid-flounce, paper bag wings taped to your shoulder blades. I am sitting on the kitchen floor watching you, arms wrapped around my knees, unsmiling, unconvinced. That day, like many others, you insisted I make you magic wings, insisted you would fly, insisted I watch you do it, insisted on joy in spite of my perpetual seriousness, my constant fear of the weather. I tried to shake you away when you held on too tightly. I always felt like the branch. I never felt like the bird. I chose this photo to place in your casket because it's how I want to remember you, not the way you were at the end, spitting rage into your last words, blaming everyone else for the ways that gravity failed you, for the storms that kept blowing you back. There is no word for a sister who unbecomes. This last poem from Night Swim is also for my sister, and it's called Chambered Nautilus. It's an ekphrastic poem. It's written about a poster, a print that I purchased at the Andrew Wyeth Museum in Maine on a trip with my sister when we were in our early 20s. I think it will speak for itself. This is Chambered Nautilus. A woman sits up, weary in her nightdress, holds her knees, dying in bed. A basket of thread unspooling beside her. She turns toward the window, and by the way light floods the glass, we assume she gazes out onto the sea. At the foot of the bed, the chambered nautilus waits. The dying woman, Wyeth's mother-in-law, has remained with me through half my life. 2 divorces, 3 children grown, the carrying on after unbearable loss. The old woman whose face I wouldn't recognize does not bear witness, but she never leaves me. The morning I found out that my sister was gone, the old woman watched the ocean chip away at the shore. 20 years ago, my sister stood beside me when I bought this print. We were visiting the Wyeth homestead in Maine, promised each other we would meet here again someday when we were old and love had failed us. Christine was her pick, a woman crawling and reaching for home, her numb legs dragging behind her, pointer finger raised and wavering like a broken compass. I chose chambered nautilus, no longing for arrival, just a turning away from the room where your life will end and toward whatever light the world still holds. Okay, I try not to end with poems from Night Swim. I try to kind of progressively go a little bit lighter. This one is not light, but I promise the last one will be. This poem is called Gold, and it was published in Rust and Moth after the Asian spa murders in Atlanta. Here's Gold. This week, scientists created something resembling a human embryo. They try to alchemize life as though it is a precious metal. By Tuesday, 8 people are shot dead outside Atlanta, 6 of them Asian. My first thought is, why did the killer do it? My second thought is, I hope they pronounce their names correctly on television. 3 of the victims worked at Gold Spa. Someone throws back a beer, makes a joke about massage parlors and happy endings. How many times has a man said to me, I've always had a thing for Asian women? I want to pretend this isn't about race, that the women who are shot to death don't look like me, my mother, my daughter. I try to ignore the fact that the killer looks like my high school boyfriend. When people are killed, we always want answers, as though murder should somehow make sense. But space-time doesn't account for who we lose, or how, or why. All of the gold we will know has already fallen to Earth on the backs of dead stars. This week, scientists work tirelessly, hoping for a breakthrough, try to understand what they're missing when it comes to making human beings. They ask, how does a cell become human? They ask, what goes wrong? Okay, the last poem I'm going to read is, I'm feeling a little bit, I don't know, emotional or nostalgic about my children lately. I have 2 teenagers and a 10-year-old who acts like a teenager lately. And, you know, I've just been the way that parents do, like looking at their baby pictures and wondering how everything happened as quickly as it did, and how when it was happening, I felt like every day was a year when they were little and not sleeping. But I wrote this poem, How We Fly, for Lantern Review. And it's about generations and the distance between generations and wanting your children to understand what's important to you and beginning to recognize that that's not as important as them walking in the world the way that they're meant to. So this is called How We Fly. We are watching Iron Man again, and the portrait of my Harmony hangs on the wall where it has for years. In it, her hanbok is folded across her chest like the wings of a paper crane. I ask my daughter if she'd ever like to visit Korea. She shrugs, looks at me strangely, announces that she doesn't feel Korean. She has never eaten dried squid or kimchi, has never walked the marketplace in Myeongdong, has never been to Jeju to see the brazen and glorious pearl divers she was named after. She has never bitten into a persimmon in November. She can't even swear in Korean. Our Dachshund stares at his reflection in the fireplace door, wags his tail, satisfied with the one who looks back at him. On the screen, Tony Stark builds his iron suit from bomb parts, emerges from a cave in a foreign land to obliterate the bad guys with only his fearlessness and his flame-blasting gloves. Why do you love this movie so much? I ask. She looks at me as if there could only be one answer. He tries to do his father's work, but doesn't let it hold him back. He isn't a superhero, but he still flies. Soon, Tony Stark will announce who he really is. My daughter will cheer, jump from the couch, clap her hands, the way she did as a toddler in her crib when she saw me coming. In the portrait, my Halmoni is still young, but her brow is already furrowed, her hair pinned loosely into a nest. What you don't see in the photo are the birds above her, scattering in all directions. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you so much, Joan. That was really wonderful. It's always so great to hear you read. Every time you read, I get goosebumps. Thank you for your work, and thank you for your bravery and sharing all of that with us tonight. Okay, now we're going to go to Anna V.Q. Ross, whose most recent book, Flutter Kick, won the 2020 Benjamin Saltman Poetry Award and was just published by Red Hen Press in 2022. Her previous collections include If a Storm, Figuring, and Hawk Weather, which won the Jean Pedrick Chapbook Award from the New England Poetry Society. A recipient of fellowships from the Massachusetts Cultural Council, the Fulbright Foundation, Virginia Center for the Creative Arts, and Vermont Studio Center, her recent work appears in Kenyon Review, Harvard Review, The Nation, Poetry Northwest, Southern Humanities Review, the Southern Review, and elsewhere. She is poetry editor for Salamander Magazine and teaches at Tufts University and through the Emerson Prison Initiative. January Gill O'Neill says, in this extraordinary, tender, brutally honest collection, Anna V.Q. Ross's Flutter Kick explores the fullness of life while harnessing poetry's ability to examine the past. This feminist voice not only marvels and reveals, but also hums, channels, witnesses, and affirms. Ross navigates the waters of motherhood and memory, tempers regret with resoluteness, and does so with soft rhymes in language that lifts off the page. She observes small moments to discover big truths. Flutter Kick is a fine-spun, insightful work of art that is eloquent, revelatory, and self-aware. Please help me welcome Anna V.Q. Ross.
Hi, thanks so much. That was really beautiful work, Joan and Lauren, and I'm really looking forward to Edwin. And thank you, Jennifer, for this opportunity to read for Hudson Valley Writers Center. I love your reading series, so I'm just so thrilled to be here and to get to share work with all of you. I'm gonna read mostly from Flutterkick, maybe squeeze in another newer thing at the end, but we'll see. This book just came out a couple of weeks ago, so I'm still finding my way through it. But as January really kindly and astutely said, it's a book about motherhood, and I feel like it's a book about origin and the way that motherhood in many ways returns us to our own childhood, our own place of beginnings, and helps us see them anew. So I'm going to start with the first poem in the book, which is called House. I come from there with lavender growing small against the bricks. I come from there with a little white jug and a tea towel on the tray. I come from there with a worn stair rug and a wooden banister, leading up 2 floors past bedroom doors to a room at the very top, with a window looking down to a square of grass on a garden wall, where roses grow with tangled canes rooting between the cracks. I come from where I once was told someone attached a lock on her bedroom door and didn't say why or who she feared might open it through all the years she stayed in the house with lavender grown small against the bricks, and the roses rooting through the wall, and the tea towel on the tray, and the little white jug and worn stair rug she descended the day she went away. I come from there. This next poem, I had the good fortune of going to the Virginia Center for Creative Arts a couple of times just before the pandemic, and this next poem takes place there. It's called Almost a Mothering. Consider reduction. The 5 turkey vultures making sleek, dark circles above the field this morning. They hunt by smell, I read, but hunt isn't right. Instead, they gather from the air some wind-translated sign of carcass. No punishment, nothing inflicted, the angle of their plunge a means to rewind body to material, almost a mothering. Each afternoon, when the freight train pushes its high whine through the culvert near the field, I remember I was named for the woman in that famous Russian novel who tossed herself from the station platform as the engine pulled in. No revising that action. She was a mother too. At 12, I read it and thought her a fool. Now I see how a life buckles. A horse whose head has been yanked too often takes command how it can. The vultures land in the lichened branches of a nearby tree to claim the offal of this neighborhood. Red crowned, they preen with their hooked beaks, accepting every stain. For those of you who don't know, VCCA is located on an old horse farm, and the ghosts of the horses seem to kind of be around somehow. So one of them came into that poem while I was there. I'm going to read a self-portrait. There are a lot of them in this book. They kind of are a thread throughout. And this is the very first one that I wrote. Gosh, I can't even remember how. It's a very early poem from the book, and it's the first of the self-portraits. Self-portrait as smaller moon. The remnants of a second moon that orbited the Earth billions of years ago may be splattered across the far side of our moon, scientists claim. The two appear to have crunched together in a gentle collision. The Guardian. I wasn't looking at her. Instead, I watched years of tides dismantle coasts, watched my shadow paint its pupil on revolving blue, watched haze, watched birds, watched ice caps spread and shrivel, but not the path I traced above or who flew with me. What is belonging? I floated in my dust and ore, collecting light like sympathy from strangers. And when it came, the wind felt this way too, polite intrusion. Pay attention, mothers say, look both ways, don't follow strangers. But in that turning, I forgot. Startled by this one so close behind, I wobbled toward her, healing before I knew I moved. Where does the moon go, Mama? I went to mountains, foothills, craters, spread myself against the dark back of this lovely other, burrowed in, as lighter rocks slipped singly by, pursuing their own gravity. That one was from very early in my daughter's life, and I'm going to read another that's a little bit later. All Hallows. The year that she was 3, my daughter was a fox for Halloween. Orange felt hood with ears, a tail stitched to her back, and painted on whiskers. The only girl in the preschool parade not dressed as a princess. That was the same year something kept finding its way through the back wall of Granny's garden to dig up moles. Mornings, we'd find the excavated holes, entrances we hadn't known existed. A fox, said Mr. Lovely, who came to cut the grass. We'd need to put down poison. But would that remove the fox or just the moles, we asked? And wouldn't it be better to find the wall's gap and fill it? My daughter cried for the fox she never saw, begged us not to kill it. But still she didn't want to go alone into the garden. I think now she was trying on fear that Halloween, not the fox circling the hen house kind, but the unseen thing that leaves a gash exposing mud and plunder beneath the grass you thought you knew. In the picture we took, I hold her and her baby brother on my lap. He stares at her strange ears and painted face, amazed. She bares her teeth and locks the camera in her gaze. So there's a lot of found text in this book, which for me is another, I was going to say symptom, another experience of motherhood, that sort of voices are always coming at you from both your children and the world outside as you're trying to sort of valiantly plow ahead and do whatever it is you have to do, like finish the carpool or fold a load of laundry or try and grade some papers in my case. And you're having to kind of integrate all of those voices while continuing along the road. So this is a poem that does that, and I'm just going to say ahead of time that it engages assault, and it uses found text or from Christine Blasey Ford's testimony at the Senate confirmation hearings for Brett Kavanaugh. It's called Fugue. Can you tell us what you don't forget? The senator's voice repeats from the radio. It's rush hour, Boston, I-93, driving home from dance class with my daughter in the back seat. Her 12-year-old legs stretched long in pink body wrappers brand spandex as she wonders aloud what we're going to eat for dinner. Air brakes wheeze, then release beside us as a bus muscles past. And should I change the station as the senator's voice repeats, can you tell us what you don't forget? Above the traffic, rush hour, Boston, I-93, my daughter in the back seat. Girl whose body I once unwrapped from mine. Is she listening now as the woman speaks? I was pushed onto the bed. His weight was heavy. I shake my head. Boston, rush hour, I-93, as if I could swerve by what edges up in me. He put his hand over my mouth. It was hard for me to breathe. Boston, rush hour, I-93, but I'm cruising a suburban street of dandelion lawns, legs the same age as my daughter, who jams her knees against my seat when I hit the brakes as one last car squeezes in ahead of me. Can you tell us, Boston, rush hour, I-93 is fixed to a grid of red, what you don't forget? Taillights that bleed their after images. Can you, against gray sky? I'm tired, forget, picturing my bed back home. What you don't, quilt pulled tight against the sheets. Can you, don't, forget? Or is it that other bed? What you, and what year was it? Forget, don't, what day? Don't, can you forget? How? Tell us, don't, tell us, what? Did he? What? Can you forget? Don't tell us, touch me? I was wearing a one-piece bathing suit. I believed he was going to rape me. Boston, rush hour, I-93, a taillight flickers, horns begin to beep. How many times will I repeat this drive? Mom, when are we going to move? Her voice reaches toward me and I ease my weight up off the brake, considering the question. The miles like bodies fall between us and what I don't forget. In Boston, rush hour, I-93, driving home from dance class with my daughter in the back seat. As Jan said, this is a book that sort of, it engages a lot of anxieties, perhaps, that I have about motherhood. And one thing that I think about kind of a lot is the fact that I have two kids. My daughter is 15. My son is 13. No, sorry, 12. He's almost 13. And both of them our country has been at war since before they were born and for almost their entire childhood, up until very recently, but it feels as though we're on the brink of that again. And that was something that wasn't my experience as a child. I grew up in the 80s and 90s during this, what seems now like this very brief period in which our country was not at war. And I wonder about what that means for them. So this poem, if I can ever find it, I'm going to read a couple poems that engage those ideas. Geography report. In the locker room of the YMCA pool, my daughter, skinny-limbed 10-year-old in blue-green swimsuit, presses one sharp finger into the loose skin below my navel, laughing to see the white indented moon she leads there. From high enough, one body looks like any other. 10-year-old girl collecting firewood or man with gun, the coordinates close and closing in Langman province, Afghanistan. From the pool's deck, I watch my daughter kick and bob in chlorine blue, torso and legs a momentary T against the black spine of the lane wavering beneath. Solely with the intent of countering known insurgents, the NATO spokesman speaks as the girl's body bends, a piece of white cloth fluttering, then straightens, holding a stick. In the pool, my daughter rolls and thrashes, element within element, elbow flashing in air before it falls, then reappears. Watch me. Is this a day the girl has waited for, old enough now to work? Aunts, grandmother, the cousin married this spring, all nodding to her in the beginning light of the hour before the early walk to school. Is there a school? Their bundle of brush stacked neatly as the planes engage with precision munition and direct fire. Hip, flank, shoulder at the water's lip. Mama, watch. White, flutter, kick above the center line. An arm crooks out, her fingers splayed, each tendon raised and seeking as she reaches for the wall. Or would she have slept? Small moon beneath her blanket. Unfortunately, we have become aware of possible civilians. Let someone else walk out into the still, dark morning. Someone else search out the branches to burn that hour. I guess I should have said that the title of the book comes from that poem too, Let Her Kick. And the text is from a Washington Post article about this attack in Afghanistan. This next one is called Wrestling with Gods, and it begins with an epigraph by Wishlava Szymborska. Sorry, my mouth is dry. Wrestling with Gods. After every war, someone has to tidy up. Wishlava Szymborska. You are in the small tornado of your own element, my son shouts from the living room couch, instructing his father on their next battle. No, like this, thwack of cushions. I win. Narrative is important. Also the rules. Who decides the terrain, personnel, weapons, size of the tornado? Yesterday, it was cheetah versus tiger, and my abdomen he rammed first with a pillow, then his head, as if trying to reverse the last 7 years. Other days, it's Thor and Loki, or Zeus and Apollo. Each time I brace myself into a tripod on my knees, wondering what we're preparing for, as he storms across the practical, all-weather upholstery. Today on the kitchen radio, a BBC reporter somewhere near the Syrian border responds, "We understand that this may be a very dynamic war," to a question I didn't hear. I had to train myself to wrestle, learn not to flinch as my son dove towards muscles he once stretched and separated, jabbing from within. We practice these battles, already knowing the endings. You be Achilles and I'll be Thetis, wringing the hand that held her boy's naked tendon as the president's helicopter retreats over the sea. Now in the living room, my son growls and tucks his chin as he becomes a Spinosaurus. My husband turns into a killer octopus, and the BBC moves to a new headline on a different continent. I steady myself against the granite lip of the kitchen sink, its crystals volcanic, all that heat turned element. I'm going to move to a couple poems from the end of the book. Lauren, you inspired me with your love poems, and this is a love poem about abortion. It's called After All. Even when the garlic crop is good, something else is always dying. The peas withering in that afternoon we hoped for rain instead of watering, the tomatoes overshaded. It could teach us something about pathos or fate, but really, couldn't we have tried harder, predicted the week of heat when the spinach bolted? The trouble with gardening is there's rain and wind and sun to blame, like the woman in the buffer zone outside the clinic who spat at me and screamed, "What kind of man is he to bring you here?" While I held your hand and our daughter curled in her crib at home with the sitter. Afterward, I dozed against you on a park bench overlooking the city until I was ready to go back to work. But that's not gardening. And still, there's the garlic, those round, paper-skinned heads you pulled this morning and carefully laid out to dry on the driveway's warm, flat bed below our window. I think I'll just read 2 more. Here's a poem about math homework, a bane of my existence. My son hands me the family letter about this unit, page torn from his 4th grade math book. I'm supposed to read it, considering how geometry and classifying shapes, some words are highlighted so I get the gist, might fit into dinner table chat or fights about whose turn it is to take a bath first tonight. I misread convert as covert and lose minutes wondering what a covert measurement could be and why. But no one wants to know they're being measured or tested, do they? Even though we are every day, all our angry faces, likes, and hearts totted up, politicians and yogurts we prefer, a pointillist scrim gluing us to the world, little sticky bits tracing wherever we've been. But maybe I should say I, not we. I don't like being tested. My husband, for instance, doesn't seem to mind. Almost high school dropout with a perfect score on his SAT. But all those choices freeze me. The family letter tells me I should encourage your child to explain. True or false? I am a good mother if I am always awake and dressed before my children. True or false? I am a bad mother. If I give up blank and start blanking 3 to 5 times a week, I am a good mother, wife, other. Please identify my lines of symmetry. But in high school, I liked geometry, maybe because my teacher drove a sky blue Corvette and wore vintage polyester skirt suits, and maybe because the tests felt like stories of how one shape could become another, divided but still itself. I liked that I could see it happening point by point, the way every night, after my husband and the kids are asleep, I go around the house clicking off each light until I become invisible, even to myself. And I'll end with a last self-portrait. This is called Self-Portrait with Washing Machine. In those days, children slept all over us, and we were fast and best, but didn't know it, and sticky and milk sour, and they were perfect pink mouths of unknowing, each breath filling theirs with ours. The children slept, and we were happy. And when we woke, we learned about choices we'd been making when we thought we were putting on our good shoes, the ones our mothers gave us, or missing the last bus back, or wondering if we really liked cilantro after all, its sweet rot smell, or letting a boy show us mountains from the window of a plane. But no, there were choices, and here were new small bodies to prove it. So we slept and woke to stand facing the washing machine and chose warm, chose cold, chose permanent press with medium spin, express wash, normal, casual. We spun the dial and rinsed where it landed, and we were happy, and then we slept. And when we woke, we saw figures walking through the trees in the park across the street. They stopped, their bodies momentary trunks, and then kept moving, and we were happy. And on the parent and child parking signs at the grocery store, we were a tall triangle with a circle head bending down to a short square with a circle head looking up, and we slept, and we were happy. And the children woke to tell us that a new age had come into their bodies, that they could feel it beating, and we were happy, and we slept. And the children woke, and we tried to explain the difference between country. Was there a wall over the mountains? And city? And here, each a shape falling smaller inside another. And we slept, and the children woke, and we woke, and we reminded ourselves to wash the strawberries in vinegar so they wouldn't spoil, and pack the lunches, choosing the fruit piece by piece into plastic snap lid boxes, and hang the clothes to dry. And we were happy, and we slept, and the thing that was happy slept too. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much, Anna. It's so great to hear all of you reading together tonight and the way your poems talk to each other. So wonderful. Thank you. Don't forget that to read all the bios and all of the books, buy all the books. Natalie's putting everything in the chat for you. Now we're on Edwin Torres. Edwin Torres is a poet, performer, sound visualist, graphic designer, and editor. He has brought his body lingual poetics across many disciplines and has had 13 books of poetry published, including Ameriscopia, and he's the editor of The Body in Language, an anthology. His latest book, Conundrum, I Will Be Your Many-Angled Thing, was awarded the American Book Award in 2022. He grew up in New York City and currently lives in Beacon, New York. His latest book presents the choices created when visual poetics reflects on ecopoetics. The book is a call for the reader to invent multiple possibilities with every page turn. Poet and critic Juliana Spar states, Edwin Torres is our 21st century Mayakovsky. Please, all of you, help me welcome Edwin Torres.
Yay, thank you. Thank you, Jennifer, for that lovely intro. It's great reading with everybody, and thank you for for having us all be part of this series. Yes, the book Conundrum is I'm trying to see if poetry can guide me to a search of some sort. So I will read, okay, the order of my reading. The first and last piece are from the book. The pieces in the middle are, let me see, some will be from a journal entitled About Space, some will be in Brooklyn Rail, and some are unpublished. I tend to go straight through, so I just wanted to give you a little heads up. Thank you all. Overflow. Oh, and I apologize, I have a slight cough. It's that time of year. Overflow of one point. Here, allowing for sun to be sun. Understanding capacity for words. Here, stated by a poem's title as experience before knowing. Of hearing the one word alive through the eyes of mother, father, planet. To be experience shaped by phase. I should here state phase as phrase, a third knowing, always present, shaped before title. To accept more knowing than mother, father, planet will ever know. To slip and flow to sun, who has everything he needs already. And here in my father's state, that reality, too immersive for my everyday structure to accept, too transformative to know the finite composition of this body, my own, is fraught with instability. If I weren't a poet, I should here speak of language as capacity, of anthem as mirage, of moment as steady striation. Dare I, sun's ascendant dark, in I, if the I in the point being made, the point of capacity, overwhelming antiquity, if the I in I weren't a poet, I would worry that I couldn't separate existences, that there's much more of me in the unknown than I will ever need or see or be. If I weren't a poet, I would have imploded into a regular human by now, and my son would have left my orbit a long time ago. At the gate of the open sphere, of ancient trees, of bloods, of to happen in. Stretch out the word for thing for what means thing. Of eaters bending, breathing you, of older lungs, of you, of tell, of what retells, the wild of wind, a younger tongue, of eating wind inside the wildest of the eaters so, the lowest light, the centered O, the eater's ode, of you by you, of thing retooled, of word by of, reread, of page by of, re-ring, re-you, of tell, of what means tell. The Middle of the Sphinx. This poem is dedicated to Bernadette Meyer, who passed away last week, a legendary, iconic poet who always challenged poetic conventions and who was always unfailingly herself and taught me to be always unfailingly myself. Thank you, Bernadette. The Middle of the Sphinx. My riddle, a question I slip on between the membranes. My fissured speech, patterned dojo. They say the challenge is in the uneasy. To rest in the known is comfort. To rest is death. How dramatic. To stir the melt of distant pores, to sink out what for some is reason, for others shore. To art as nature intended. Note verb out of subject. To art a lost night of life is life. Muffled through these walls, an answer geysered as empathy. How time zones riff notes out of something you barely hear. My gone between, rounding my papers, spiral effigy, chimes out that lost chords through a street of windows will save you. Wounding a moon is a lost art. To flay skin using tongue, easy as rain. Om desettler, my human soul, asking another same question, framed indifferently, so as to appear discovered. I had a dream with the poet Willie Perdomo. It was a full-on hangout with you last night. In a dream, we were on the corner of 2nd and 49th watching a cartoon show on my laptop set down on the sidewalk, a compilation of 2D Bugs Bunny and Pixar Land with commercials between each. The rest of the people in our crowd had gone inside one of the buildings. Leaving us after dinner in the building was a lobby with a bowl of paste-on three-headed eyeballs and an apartment door left open where a party was. No music, maybe we were taking a break from the party, or maybe we stumbled upon it. The night was clear with us standing on the street over the laptop, not bending to get a better view to see what we could without effort was the hangout. Many bags of fast food at our feet. Don't know how many hours we'd been there, but there were more unopened ones waiting while the cartoons played. On the laptop, the commercials were all highly produced animations of apartments with glossy highlights and bright interiors. It seemed that the commercials were meant to provide a home for the viewer who didn't have one, who may have been watching the commercials on a street and wished there were walls and picture frames and dogs and surfaces they could clean and claim as their own. I came to this awakening and thought I should tell you, but then the commercial was over and I said, I just thought of something, but I'll tell you later. You were focused on the screen there on Lexington and said, like, whatever, but I was on 2nd and said, whatever back. This episode had characters we'd never seen on a flat dimension, no CGI which threw us off. When finished, I closed the laptop. Your head was shrouded in a goggle hoodie of yellow with black shoulder shrug. I said, I think commercials are for lonely people whose night is just starting now and want some sense of home and order. You said, well, I have more confidence than that, and exposed your bald head to the street lamps and passing headlights, making the city a revolving galaxy bouncing off your head. Suddenly, defending my own inside, I explained how smoothed out Pixar had made conflict and how we were in a world without edges, reflecting our slow, emotional descent. You said you started writing poetry to calibrate people on street corners. I said I bought Mad magazines, my computer somehow surviving the debris of a moonless night. You know how to string rhymes together, I dared. 3 students came out of the building with the party, followed by a classless teacher. They all pointed at us. I quickly tidy up the junk food at our feet into one convenient bag. In that same motion, you swooped into the lobby and came out with many three-headed eyeballs pasted on your shaved head. The street we were on had become a slight hill. They all gathered speed as they walked by us quickly, or maybe we had always been downhill. You on Lexi, me on second, my laptop folded. You told me the first words you ever rhymed. That's when I knew it was time to go and thought about a cab. But where would I drop you off? You said either no, or you'd walk, or nothing, as we hugged, slapped five, said love things. And I wondered about someone else a long time ago on that same corner who I dropped off and tagged graffiti underground, never seeing light again. I thought of you again, and how endings and poems are nothing like life, and thought of him again, and how endings to life are nothing like poems. Your clips. Don't lose so much of yourself. You know your life is precious. Don't give so much of yourself. You know your life is precious. Don't lose a light on yourself. You know your time is precious. Don't hold the light on yourself. You know that shine is vicious. Don't leave it all on a shelf. You know your soul is precious. Don't take it all on yourself. You know you're so delicious. Don't let your rivers erode. You know your mountain mission. Don't ever loosen your hold. You know your fallen edges. Don't sell a battle your own. Your words are such a treasure. Don't savage jabber your poem. Your will, your why, your measure. Don't be the one to believe. Your life's a crystal lesson. Don't feed your flutter, your flow, to sing your fallen feather. Don't intellect your crawl. Just lower your inhibitions. Don't be the one to believe. Your mission is only position. Don't leave it all in a dream. Your rise is what you're wishing. Don't take it all on yourself. Your morning's in your vision. Don't let a listen alone. The light you steal is precious. Don't luminesce your howl. Your soma summons heaven. Your sufferer savior savant. A seller's 7 seconds. Your simile severs a saint. A soul in need of heaven. Don't be so hard on yourself. Your sorrow sounds ambitious. Don't say you're less than yourself. You're feeling so malicious. Don't lose so much of yourself. Can you see your solo precious? The rhythm, a rapid refrain. Can you see your solo presence? You know your life is precious. You know you're so delicious. You know your life is precious. You know you're so delicious. You know your life is precious. You know you're so delicious. You know your life is precious. You know you're so delicious. By arriving unlanded, can we disarrange to show heart by where we were when we let in something, to let in? Writing about oppression and freedom and being heard takes on many forms over a lifetime of writings, framed around many doorways, many openings into whatever we're ready to hear. Somehow in the corner of someone's world is their entire choice for direction. To take in, take out, alone, be gone, to insert a lifetime of choice into reckoning, the pollinator, the murderer, the teacher, the timekeeper, the choice for a letter inside a wrong word, to fall, locator, to steer someone's corner into the sitting of someone else's. How do you work with outrage to create nuance? If art is nuance, if force is needed for revisitation, does a poem equate time to change, or is something else what appears when adjectives lose their call? And now, Johnny Cash is singing Bob Dylan with a mariachi band. It's there, in the harmonica solo, where America absolves history for abolition. America was a solution for Latinx, to frack firmament, to ecoplasmic opportunity, by inching accent out of the alphabet. Clever moment chants, meme divergent. Reality grovels in the rivers, not just ripped by channel me. I'm looking for the darkest poem I have about hope. Realize I don't have that misguided seer's mentality. The function of art, to capture dark as litmus. Flash mob, wary of the immobile errant, nurtured by anvil mentality, evil's aura, nebulous of wormhole diction. Pardon my face front messability. I am showing the world that I don't have the answers and using art to get there. Complex as psychology, what we attribute to dictator Ratchet, if theater serves evolution by its linear re-render of space, can we space ability into action, by section, by lesion, by sphere, by seeking past what I have here as words in drive-by collision? Sensation of saving renders capture as time served, allows trigger its bop, inebriate bombing the ear prick of a triggered word. I had insight towards the mineshaft of a sculpture's apparition, reguised as a nation. To reconfigure nationality out of the remnants we swipe through every day. Hand grabs by the glass sorcerer we blow. Thankful to have a roof, this language, what counts for one stuffed teddy as catnip bait for feral flight. We find ways to isolate truth, to isolate power by calling on the shapes that save us, the shapes that survive us out of brain into body. We call on our instincts to isolate hurt away from emotion. To protect our power, we call on our truth to attempt deflection out of heart. We call on our hurt to isolate deflection away from the shapes that save us. The ones that define us are the ones we call on. To survive our truth, our hurt, we call on our finding out of knowing, away from doing. We find ways to isolate truth. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Edwin. Thank you all for your wonderful readings tonight. We only have time for maybe one question. So one or two questions. So I will definitely ask the question that all of our students like to ask of each reader who comes. And that is for the students at the Hudson Valley Writers Center who are working on a debut collection. Could you, authors, please give us your advice to the students? And keep in mind, please, that our students are all ages. They are, post MFA, pre MFA. So if you could give some advice to the students about putting together a collection. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
I can jump in and just share that 2022 was the year that I had my first chapbook published, as well as my first full-length collection. And what was interesting for me about publishing both is that I truly did not think that the poems would ever find a publisher, because they were so difficult, and because I had read so few books like the one that, the ones that I had written. So as I was putting them together, I really wasn't thinking about audience. And I actually, now looking back on it, believe that that was really a gift, because I just wasn't giving a lot of thought to, is anyone going to buy this? Because I just didn't think that anyone would. And when I started circulating it, I sent it to publishers that I knew I had seen take risks in the past. So, the press that I wanted more than any other press was Diode, and that's where it ended up being published. And I chose them as like my dream press because I admired the risks that they took, and I thought, if anybody is going to publish this, it might be them. And they ended up taking it. So I think that my advice would be to hone your craft as much as you possibly can, to read as much as you can, to have a group of writer friends that help you, that read your work, but really to focus on the work, and what it is you feel you need to say, and what poems you believe need to exist, regardless of whether anyone actually publishes your book. Because I have found in my experience that by writing that way, that I do find homes for even very difficult poems, because I'm just not thinking so much about audience.
One thing I'll add to that, that's great, Joan. Yes, work on your work. There's something to be said for including pieces that have been published by journals. Like sometimes you send out pieces and an editor has a keen eye for what you may not see yourself. So there's one aspect of collecting pieces that have been published somewhere else in another form. However, that doesn't always make for the most interesting read through. So it's a little bit of both, where you kind of like are trusting somebody else's eye to kind of develop your own. But then also, yes, live with your work and just really see what you need to speak about and what is speaking to you through your work. Print it all out and put it on the walls. see it all in front of you. It's really important to see the journey that you're taking and see how it holds up.
I think I want to kind of piggyback on that, maybe add to that, and say that for me, the way that I put together books is to throw in some element that I haven't been working with all along, to put in a challenge to myself, which is like in Took House, it was to write poems about raptors, and then it was to put in art poems and to figure out how things could work together. That's really interesting to me. I write a lot about the same subject when it's on my mind, and then I have to figure out which of those poems are actually valuable to that particular collection, and which I put to the side and say, okay, that's nice, but and it might be a good poem or a good 10 poems, but it doesn't belong here. So how to widen, I think, the subject that I'm working with beyond the thing that I think I'm writing about.
I wanted to go last because I was trying to think back on how I felt when I first published my book and how I got there. And I'll say that I interspersed chapbooks with both of my full-length books. So the first thing I published was a chapbook called Hawk Weather, and then I published a full-length book called If a Storm, and then a chapbook Figuring, and this newest book, Flutter Kick. And the chapbooks contained poems that then went into the longer manuscripts. And I think that the thing that I found really useful about the chapbook was that it allowed me to sort of have a dry run at a longer manuscript, and then to do a little bit of what Lauren was just saying about, finding the poems that stayed and like could be a frame for the larger manuscript. As I said, the Flutter Kick has a lot of self-portrait poems, and those all appeared in my earlier chapbook, Figuring. But not everything in Figuring stayed, because then once I started finding other poems to layer in for the longer manuscript, I saw which ones were not going to work. But it wasn't, I didn't feel the need to hold on to them so hard because they'd already gotten their outing in a chapbook. So I think thinking about different ways of publishing and not just being completely like focused on it has to be a long full-length manuscript. Like if you can find other smaller ways to build to that first book and then that second book and third, fourth, whatever book, I think it allows you to look at publishing a little differently and look at your poems differently.
Thank you all so much for answering that question for our students and for your wonderful readings tonight. We really are thrilled to have heard your work and to have heard the four of you together. And again, we'll let you all know when you can watch this reading at the end of January when it's up on our YouTube channel. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you for being such a great audience. And please don't forget to buy the newest books from these wonderful poets, because we've been hearing that Zoom readings do not really sell books as well as regular readings in person. So please don't forget to buy their books. And we hope to see you back here on Sunday for our published student reading, and on December 14th again for our last reading of 2022. Thank you all so much. Bye, everyone. Thank you
Bye.
so much, Natalie, for co-hosting with
Bye.
me tonight. Thank you all for being here.
Good night. Thanks, Jennifer.
Everybody.
Thank
Good night.
you.